Hi and welcome. I'm Gretchen Burns Bergman, co-founder and executive director of The New Path and lead organizer of our collaborative Moms Unite to End the War on Drugs campaign, which is across the United States with 35 states represented, and we have partnerships in 6 countries. Today's topic is Empty Chair at the Holiday Table. This is our 8th annual campaign, and it's kicking off today. The holidays can be a particularly painful time for families missing a loved one at their family gathering. This campaign highlights the loss of a loved one due to the failed war on drugs and missing due to stigma, incarceration, drug war violence, and overdose deaths. And now, because of COVID-19, many of the gatherings aren't being held because of requirements of social distancing. So these are extremely challenging times. I hope that you all are safe and healthy as we navigate these troubling times. So thanks for joining us today. Joining me on this interview is Moms Unite members Alexis Plews, who is the founder of Truth Farm in New York. She lost her oldest son, Jeff, to overdose. And Diane Goldstein is a retired police lieutenant and steering committee member of Moms United, also with Law Enforcement Action Partnership. I'm going to start with Alexis. Alexis, would you please tell us your family story and how that moved you to the advocacy work that you do and your harm reduction work and Truth Farm?
Thank you, Gretchen. Nice to be here. So I lost my oldest son, Jeff, as you mentioned, in August of 2014. And, as I put it, his life was lost due to the drug war. The easiest way to summarize what Jeff and our family went through is to say that his shortest stay in jail was longer than his longest stay in treatment. Despite seeking treatment frequently and wanting desperately to get better, between insurance barriers, treatment barriers, and barriers to medication-assisted treatment, barriers to harm reduction, Jeff just couldn't get the help that he needed to get well. And instead, we as a country have chosen to be punitive in our measures towards substance use and addiction. And that's what Jeff faced, and that was not a way that could help him heal and get well. So, unfortunately, I lost him, as I mentioned, in August 2014. He had not used for 20 months, so he was, in recovery, and I will never know, what led him to use that day, but we all know that using after abstinence is a frequent method of overdose fatalities due to a loss of tolerance. So he used and we lost him, and our family will absolutely never be the same. We, as a result of that experience, both while Jeff was alive and after losing him and facing the stigma and learning how many families' experiences were just like ours, families seeking help, not being able to find it, loved ones being jailed and incarcerated instead of being treated. I started Truth Farm, which is an organization that works to educate families on a better way to handle substance use disorder. We provide direct services, all harm reduction based, and we provide education and advocacy as well.
Yes, it's a wonderful organization, Alexis. I followed you and was happy to meet you several years ago at a harm reduction conference. So Diane is really the impersonation, the embodiment of our Moms and Cops campaign, which we've been doing for, I think, 5-6 years now. It's a partnership with Moms United to End the War on Drugs and Law Enforcement Action Partnership, previously called Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. They made a broadening change with that. She lost her brother to an overdose and has experienced firsthand how families are torn apart by the drug war. And so I'd like you to share your story of leadership and drug policy reform. But first, may I share some good news with everybody?
Absolutely, Gretchen.
So Diane Goldstein has just been named to be the executive director of the Law Enforcement Action Partnership. Previously, Neil Franklin, who has been a wonderful friend and a collaborator with us, is retiring, and Diane Goldstein is filling his wonderful shoes and so capable of doing so. So, Diane, could you please share your story and how you got started?
Sure. And so, Gretchen, I'll remind you that our Cops and Moms and Cops partnership actually goes back 9 years to 2011.
You know that stuff. I love it.
Yeah. And so my story is no different than I think all of our stories. And first, let me express, I'm so sorry for the loss of your son and the loss of such an important person in your life. What drove me to advocacy was both my grief and seeing the stigma associated with my brother's death, specifically around an immigrant issue with my mom. So we were born in Mexico City, and my mom was horrified that her son died from substance use disorder and criminalization. And so after his death is, and even during many long periods of time during my career, I had always believed that the drug war was an abject failure because there was never the treatment or the resources necessary to get people access to the treatment that would make a difference in their life. And so, the last 10 years, I've been doing a ton of work on harm reduction, police accountability, and indeed the drug war.
And you've just been a wonderful leader, a great speaker, and a beautiful writer about all of this. So thank you. You're a treasured member of the drug reform movement, leader. My story is that my two sons struggled for decades with opioid dependency, heroin, and my older son was arrested when he was 20 years old for marijuana possession, and he ended up going in and out of the criminal justice system for 11 years of his young life. Now his possession would be, now that we've passed marijuana legalization, this never would have happened, but it's a terrible example of a life interrupted and the kind of family pain associated with this. And I remember many holidays where I would go to visit him behind bars and go back and not know whether I belonged there or with the rest of my family. And, he had some involvement with the criminal justice system that was damaging as well. But I would say that the biggest damage was stigma. There were times that they just were not really invited to family gatherings because of people's discomfort. And we've come a long way since then, but stigma still runs so deep within all of this. I must say I'm really one of the lucky ones. Both of my sons are in long-term recovery now after experiencing overdose, hopelessness, the whole gamut, health challenges that are associated with it. And I hear both of you. Losing that's the worst. A mother losing, that's the absolute mother's nightmare. And how you somehow can get past it. Not only the losing your child, but also dealing with the stigma associated with it, as you, Diane, said, with your mother and your brother. And this year, so many loved ones are going to be missing due to the pandemic. And I mean, you know that drug use is up, suicide is up, overdose is up. So this COVID-19 actually exacerbates all of the problems that we're discussing. I want to reach out to people. If you want to make a comment or a question, I will try to watch the chat and to respond to you if you have something that you want to say to either Alexis or Diane. So, Alexis, I want to bounce back to you since we're talking about stigma. You know, you have 3 beautiful sons, and you lost the eldest. Was there issues in your family when your eldest died? How did your other sons respond to it? How did your family respond to it?
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, it's been really a huge challenge. And two of my sons also struggled. So 2 of my 3 sons struggled with opioid use. And then I lost Jeff, and, you know, the other 2 are doing great and they're fine now. But so we have the layered family as well, where, you know, it seemed like for several years, you know, if one was doing great, the other wasn't. So we kind of like always had that complication. And, you know, the stigma is real. There were times, especially my youngest son would get really frustrated with the situation with my oldest son, you know, and say, do we have to have him? And, you know, and like, I can understand that because they're suffering too in a completely different way. And they see the distraction and the stress and the anxiety that we as mothers experience. And they, you know, hope to not have that during a holiday. So I certainly understood that and always tried to respect it, but also always felt that Jeff should be able to feel that he could come home for holidays, and no matter what was going on, and we always did that. So there were periods of time when Jeff's life was very rough, and his own stigma towards himself, I think, was greater than anything that any of us ever could have put on him. Because I remember, like, one Christmas in particular, he called me and asked if he was going to be allowed to come for Christmas. And, like, just being asked that question, you know, made me cry, because of course, you know, of course you're going to be welcome for Christmas, Jeff. But his own shame and guilt and stigma and how bad he felt that he was putting his family through that made him question if he should even come for a holiday. But, you know, so it's within your own family dynamics. And then, of course, losing him, his brothers are devastated, you know, and, you know, on Jeff's anniversary of his passing this year, I sent them both a message and just said, thinking of you, loving you, and hope you're doing okay. And, you know, my middle son said, I miss him and think of him every day. And, you know, so it's not just our loss, you know, it's sibling loss is a painful thing too. Yeah. But, you know, all of that stigma and the stigma that our family faced when we lost Jeff from our community was instant. And I was so shocked by it. Like, I was really taken aback that when I lost Jeff, and immediately I was honest about the fact that he died from an overdose, not realizing that people would say horrible things to me. And they did, and that caused me within 24 hours to really shut down about the cause of Jeff's death. And it took me several months to come out of that dark closet of feeling like I couldn't say how Jeff died, because as soon as I did, I felt like people devalued his life based on how he died. And that's what led me to start Truth Farm, was really wanting people to recognize, like, the cause of death, or what people suffered from during their lives, certainly didn't devalue who they were as a person, and what they meant to their families, and what they could have accomplished if they were able to live and, live with us still. So yeah, the stigma is still real. I think that we've all done an incredible job turning some of that around. I know that in the course of 6 years, I've seen a drastic change in stigma in our community. But it still is very real and exists for many people.
Yeah, I've been doing this work for 21 years, and I have seen a change. And what you have started, and that stands for Addiction Treatment and Healing, we were advocating for treatment instead of incarceration, and then we moved to all forms of harm reduction, and it just kept opening up and evolving. But one of our main issues was always to reduce the stigma, and I revisit that every year and say, my God, that's still the core issue here, that we have still so far to come. And when you've lost a life and that stigmatized, people aren't admitting, far too many people aren't admitting that their child or their loved one died of an overdose, and that continues to perpetuate the stigma. But you have to be strong, in order to deal with the barbs that come with being so open, right? Diane, there's a couple of levels here, which when Alexis was talking, when she mentioned her siblings, part of it, I think we don't talk about that enough, what the experience is for a sibling. I know my older son, he found recovery long before the younger one did, and he balancing like giving up and watching the pain or hanging in there and do I continue to do harm reduction strategies, or do we try to move past and figure that he's gone from us? It's challenging. So speak to it as a sibling, and then whatever else you want to say.
It was so difficult for me because my brother's dual diagnosed, both struggling with mental health, behavioral health issues, as well as SUD, substance use disorder, was long-standing and was part of my police career as well. And so, I had a lot of professional stigma because of his run-ins with my law enforcement agency and other law enforcement agencies, which were very difficult for me to manage, and in many ways prevented me from giving my brother the proper help and support that he needed. And when I ended up retiring, my brother had been in recovery for quite a long time, and he lost his job and he lost access to his psychotropic meds. And when he lost access to his psychotropic meds, he became homeless and started self-medicating. And so we perpetuated our system of a lack of maybe a universal healthcare model where healthcare is not tied to employment. And it made me recognize a lot of kind of the deep systemic issues, not even talking about racism, just structural, how do we get people the resources that they want? And then it was the loss of my brother that, he had moved in with us, and I saw him through criminalization, recovery again, saw the impact of the criminal justice system. When I retired, I was a lieutenant. And I remember this because I ran a gang unit and ran a narcotics unit and did a lot of, not knowing what harm reduction was. I was doing harm reduction and policing, getting people's jobs and helping them access resources and, a lot of different things. And I remember one family in particular who were like third generation gang, second generation history of heroin addiction, very severely traumatized as kids, ACE, and they were raising their own children. And I remember the mom looking at me and the dad one day, and they were very open and honest. You don't know what it's like to be involved in the criminal justice system without resources, without knowing how to navigate it. And when kind of the final straw that broke my back was when my brother had been arrested, and he had a felony conviction when he was like 22, and now he's like 40 something. So it'd been 20 plus years. And it was a felony gun conviction. He'd been arrested for like less than like a little bit of methamphetamine. And methamphetamine in California back then was a Whoppler. You could go to state prison for just having a little, like literally it was a pinhead of methamphetamine. And we had gathered, you know, all his recommendations. He had volunteered at homeless shelters. He had sponsored people. He had been going through, you know, what is traditional with relapsing sometimes. It happens. It's no different than diabetics or, you know, people who have, you know, cardiac issues or cancer. It happens. And I came in prepared at his arraignment, fully dressed up, nice suit, went and introduced myself to the DA, not asking for any preferential treatment, just identifying myself as a retired lieutenant, that I understood the system and understood that he was entitled to at least go to drug court. And this baby DA, I remember this, opens up her file and so devalued my brother's work in his community for 20 years of sponsoring people and volunteering and everything else, looked at this felony gun conviction and said, I'm going to send your brother to state prison for 18 months to 3 years. And I looked at this baby DA, female, and I said, you know what? I finally get it. No, you're not going to send my brother to state prison, because I understand perfectly well the law and what he's entitled to. And so he's going to plead not guilty. I was ready to have him plead guilty and get him off your docket, but we have the resources and we're going to hire an attorney.
Oh, good.
And we did. But we had the resources. And that day was my epiphany. That day was, oh, wow. The understanding my privilege, that I had a good job and had healthcare insurance, that I had the ability to navigate an incredibly complex system that grinds people into the dust. And so when my brother passed, I knew that I had done everything in my power, because that wasn't the end of his criminalization journey. He went to drug court, got kicked out of drug court, went into treatment, got, you know, successful, then relapsed, then, you know, got jobs, lost, you know, and all of it was tied around the mental health issues. And so I didn't find my work with Lee because my brother passed in 2007. It wasn't until 2010. And in many ways, I've been making reparations for the damage that I did. And you know, and I'm still in contact, not anymore because I'm not on Facebook, you know, but I'm still in contact with people and kids that I worked with that understand the work that I do based on my lived experience, not living it, but knowing what they went through and finally having the clarity to say, we have to change the system, and the only way we're going to change the system is from within. And, you know, I will continue to fight so not one more family has to experience the pain and the suffering that all of us have gone through. And it's a hard fight because it continues every day and it breaks your heart. You know, but I do it to honor my brother, and I do it to fix the system.
You know, I have a vision in my brain that I'll never lose. It was going to court the first time when my son was arrested, and seeing him, he was drug sick, I think. He looked like a child. He didn't, you know, he barely had facial hair, but he was in a chain of prisoners in the hallway, and I nearly fainted. I still get this visceral feeling from it. Like, how dare you take my child who obviously needs help? He's a lovely, beautiful person, and you're labeling him a criminal. And I, as a mother, have nothing that I can say or do about it. That I think, you know, that sort of helpless feeling is something that I don't like being a victim. I hate being a victim, let me put it that way. So I'm going to always figure out some way to learn whatever I can about this and push to advocate for the best care of all of my loved ones, you know, my children, my friends, my family, that's the way that I need to cope with this. And but there's all these little pings, like I'm sure, Alexis, you had them too. When the phone rings in the middle of the night, is it going to be police, the morgue, the hospital? Just that you still remember that, and still that's your first impulse to freak out a bit when the phone rings. Right?
Oh yeah. I despise the phone at this point in my life for that reason. That people don't understand, like the phone rings and I have every single time a little tiny mini heart attack, I think. Yeah. It never goes.
I wrote an article years ago on about my brother, and I started it out about the phone ringing at 6 o'clock in the morning and knowing it was bad news. Just I knew instantly.
And I've had those calls where I ran out in the middle of the night to go to the hospital because he was overdosing, and or to try to get him out of jail, on and on. I want to, you touched on this, and I don't think we can let this go by without saying something. We are really living in a triple crisis of COVID-19, opioid overdose, and systemic racism. And we cannot ignore that. All of our campaigns, our Too Many Moms Morning campaign is about that, is really looking at that. You mentioned reparations. Absolutely. We need to dive deeper into that. And we've spent a couple of these sessions talking about that. During COVID-19, those people who are experiencing poverty, who can't access resources, the Black and brown communities are struggling, suffering the most. It's all exacerbated by the situation, and to do nothing is just not an option. We need to speak out for everyone as moms, right? As moms, to make these changes. I need to, I think because of time, go back to the empty chair at the holiday table. This is the logo, and you can make it your Facebook profile. This can be a frame. Mine is right now. I encourage people to do that. If you're not on the Moms United Facebook page, please join us, join our cause. A New Path is there. Truth Farm has a Facebook page. Law Enforcement Action Partnership does. Look at all of our websites and get involved in advocacy. Speak out. It's time that we all join together in resisting all forms of bigotry, in being compassionate and tolerant, because these are painful times, and the holiday season is going to be one of the toughest in history. So I think that we need to do a virtual hug with all families. This is the way the chairs are. And there's an album on the Moms United website, as well as on the Moms United Facebook page. If you would like to send us a picture of your loved one and whether they're missing because of stigma, incarceration, drug or violence, or overdose, just let us know, and then we'll put it onto a chair and add it to the page, to our album. So I'm going to shut up for a second and let each of you say some last comments, anything that's burning that you would like to share.
I just, I want to thank you, Gretchen, because you gave us both accolades, but you didn't get any. But I really appreciate, I loved meeting you, and I really appreciate that you don't just do the work that you do with A New Path, but then you are bringing together multiple organizations. Like, you're working across all the organizations that are mom related, in bringing us all together to work to end the war on drugs. And I think, if we want the ultimate way to end stigma, it's ending criminalization of substance use and addiction. I don't personally think that we will ever be able to completely eliminate stigma until we eliminate the lawlessness of using a substance. And so I really admire you and the fact that you bring all of us moms together with that focused work on ending the drug war. So I appreciate that. And, I'm like you, being a white mom, we're navigating a space where we're trying to get people to pay attention to an issue and a cause that it existed long before we got involved. And there was so much harm done. And I appreciate that you also center your work on race, and we do the same thing. And I just think it's so important. And so thank you for your work and for doing this today. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very sweet. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Gretchen, thank you very much for having me on, like always, and for the years of I think, a wonderful collaboration and partnership between us personally and our organizations. And I think I want to end this with sending healing Zen to anyone that's been impacted by the failed drug war, whatever your loss. Nothing diminishes those losses, whether it's incarceration or someone's not there because they're homeless or they've passed. And acknowledging that we have a lot of hard work to do, and we have to be inclusive of every single stakeholder. But I also want to end it on a positive note, that in the 10 years that I've been doing this hard work, we've seen tremendous changes, and the work we must get behind is initiatives like Oregon Initiative 110. That is a breakthrough that if we can model that successfully across every state, we break the backs of the drug war. And so for me, part of my goal is to continue this hard work with partners as we traverse the many pitfalls, and that my hashtag is, as we move towards reforming, really transforming, not just policing, but the entire criminal justice system, the place that we start first with is by defunding the drug war and placing all those resources back into our communities to provide wraparound services, drug treatment on demand, mental health and behavioral health services, job training, infrastructure. If we would have spent those over $1 trillion on that instead of a failed drug war, our country would be notably different. That's what will help end the stigma.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. You're both such beautiful, powerful women. I really admire you, and I'm grateful for our friendship and collaborative efforts. So to all of you, have a happy, safe, healthy, serene Thanksgiving and Christmas. We will be back next month with 2 more moms talking about the empty chair during the Christmas holidays and Hanukkah. And so thank you for joining us today. And again, join our effort.
Pleasure meeting you, Alexis.
Nice meeting you as well. Thank you so much.
Okay.